Jellyfitters, my name is Jim, and this is your Daily Brogue for 8th of July, 2025. So, it's bad. So, what we were worried about in previous things, what we were talking about was where should the limits of free speech be? Um, we had a couple of situations. So, the first situation was private property, especially fully private property. Um, Someone has the right to limit speech as much as he likes, right? If you own a house, that's a place of your refuge. So you should be allowed to be as comfortable there as you like. And no matter how amazing somebody thinks his argument is that makes you uncomfortable, you should be able to not have to listen to him in that particular place. Okay, this is bad. Okay, there we go. Lapse of floors. So how does that work? Well, in general, that would work something like um, you know, if ring room transference is best, dissent. Bad eel. No reason to play with that eel. So the idea we're looking at is you can be completely arbitrary. We're not really happy with the complete arbitrariness in that case, or some of the other things that we talked about. We'd like to have a sort of rule that tells us when we're justified, not just when we may, but when we're justified and we're doing the right thing by limiting speech in some way. So, how would we know that? What would that situation look like? The monkey didn't reappear. That is strange. Maybe the monkey got lost somewhere. I don't know. Um, so the the next thing to do is to try to figure out how justified we are in limiting speech and where the justifications are. The place we saw an attempt for that was a hierarchical view of tolerance. Um, I was listening to previously. I listened to somebody give a speech about it, and we found that in some ways sounds about right, but in some ways it sounds about it. It sounds very wrong. It gives us a very strange conclusion. Right? The conclusion that I'm saying is strange is that we should be less tolerant of original ideas than criticism of them, because or less tolerant of the criticism, right? So, but it just doesn't make sense. In fact, in some ways, it's a little odd because should you in fact um, be super critical? What are the levels of criticism? What does that mean? In some ways, what does it mean? Um, our general goal has been to avoid certain kinds of issues. Um, we said that there is a good reason for having a free speech regime, right? Or there's a reason why we have free speech, and so if we're going to limit what can be said, we have to keep that in mind, right? And both original ideas and critiques of those original ideas fall well within that place. So, strength, levitation, and identity. Not ideal, but good. It's going to be a while before I use the detect magic that I just saw, and I probably should have waited, but I didn't. So I've got this guy here. We pull up Knox. This is where I saw that other detect magic. It's a pretty crappy ring of transference. I don't know how or how often those trigger. So, chit, 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 chit. And the chainmail hasn't triggered, so that's not too bad as yet. This is where I've got to make my stand. So I was watching another thing that would argue that we have to be more loose with our restrictions. We don't want to restrict much at all. In fact, I liked this guy's definition, right? An open society is a society where you are free to both give and take offense. Um, not in any sense where you're free from being offended. That's the wrong way. Some courts might say, of course, okay. And this particular guy gave a fairly interesting example of his son, right? His son was in campus, a member of a Jewish organization, and one of these protester types came up and looked at him and called him a dirty Zionist. And here I have to be careful. I don't use the exact verbiage because the exact verbiage was a little bit crude, but his son said, well, don't you mean Jew, right? So, although Jew wasn't the word. Thirteen more turns. Just -1 chainmail. Those are both good. Life and telepathy. And of course, when confronted that way, where you've just been accused of racism, anti-Semitism, um, the other kid just, turned tail and ran. Because people don't like being called racists. It's probably the worst insult you can give for someone these days. Let's see. R tech weapon sucks. M mapping. I'm going to die. But this is another teleportation. Right. I did not expect to get one of those. All right, so I'm going to have to do this. I dislike Warhammers in general, but I dislike anything where I have to, or I lose a turn. But I really had no choice in this situation. Actually, I need to keep the dagger because I protected it. Fire immunity, I do. This is good. But I get a telepathy charm. Not a good one. Usually there are a couple of these in this position. So let's see, what do I see? Plastic gas. Nothing good. Okay, so it had been a very good Warhammer. Yes, it now defeated me. Okay, so that's another version, right? That in fact, people just have to have tough skins. Not everyone's favorite, but a pretty reasonable one.